an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Just Scudamore speaking to Evan then. Let's take you back to Paris now and ask the question, what do we know about the attackers? At this stage, very little, it seems. Reports about a couple of the brothers suggest they were low-life criminals. They drank, they took drugs, they weren't remotely religious, never attended a mosque, so we hear. There's more to come out, of course, and perhaps sketches of their backgrounds will become clearer. But inevitably, an attack of this kind that the perpetrators call jihad raises questions about the nature of religion in this war and those who carry out cold-blooded murder in its name. We're going to hear two perspectives on the link between Islamic State and Islam now. Tariq Ramadan, one of the world's leading Islamic thinkers, joins us from Doha. And then we'll hear from the historian Tom Holland, who's written widely on the history of Islam and is with me now. First to Tariq Ramadan, if we can go to you. You must recognise, Tariq, that ISIS uses Islam for the pretext of the terror it perpetrates. That's a solid link, isn't it?
Yes, I think that once again, I don't really agree with Muslims saying this has nothing to do with Islam and we have to talk about something else. I think, yes, if at the very moment somebody is saying this is Islam and this is what we are doing in the name of the Quran and quoting verses of the Quran, we have at least the moral responsibility to respond to this. By denying, in fact, that not only the very essence and the mainstream understanding of Islam have nothing to do with this, yes, but still we have to come with arguments and to show that the way they are using the verses, the way they are using the prophetic traditions, it's completely wrong. It's not relying on the right understanding, and we have to challenge the religious understanding by saying in the name of Islam, and this is, by the way, what Muslims have been doing just even before September 11 in the United States, by saying no, that's not acceptable. So what we want, what we are expecting also from the media is to hear these voices and then to go beyond this, not to ask the Muslims day in, day out to justify, to apologize, to explain what Islam is not. At the end, what is very important for us, it's to come to the common narrative of what Islam is for the huge, almost a consensus among the scholars and the Muslims around the world, and then to come together to say, okay, we are combating here violent extremism. What now we can do with our fellow British Muslims, for example, to come to a better understanding and to stop this confusion and
just explain. Sorry, Tariq, just explain what you mean about the middle, because it sounded like the media is asking the wrong question. So if you admit there is a link between what ISIS preaches in the name of terror and Islam, what is the right response to that now? What do you do with that?
No, what I am admitting is that as soon as somebody is speaking and saying, I'm talking in the name of Islam, I have to respond. Now, 10 years ago in Britain, we had exactly the same story and we were asked the same. So let me tell you something, the mainstream Muslim conscience and consciousness and citizenship and Muslims around the world are saying and repeating, and they have been doing so for so long. The fact is that after 10 years, we also have always the same questions. We are asked, are you British? What is your commitment to Islam?
But just go back to the central question then. How do you take religion out of the terror that is being committed? If you don't like that question being asked to Muslims around the world, understandably, how do you take religion out of this terror?
First, by listening to the Muslims saying that this has nothing to do, and now to come not only to find solutions by asking the Muslims to condemn, but also to come to the reasons of what something like this is done. And by the way, in the Middle East now, we have to deal, you know, Tony Blair said there is no relationship between what is happening, our foreign policy, and what is happening in the country. I think that nothing ever could justify killing innocent people in Paris. But we also have to say, what is the foreign policy from France, from Britain, from the European countries when it comes to go and to kill people in Afghanistan? And when, for example, a school is bombarded, it's as if the innocent people have less value than our people in Britain or in Paris. That's not going to help us to solve the problem, because the human values have the same. The human beings have the same values. No, but you have to listen to these as well.
I'm going to put this to Tom Holland, who's our other guest, who I want to respond to you because we haven't got very long. You heard that. He's talking about, if you like, a lack of equation between recognising the different elements that go into this terror. Tom, do you accept that?
Well, I think actually it's a very Protestant presumption that you can siphon religion off from the flux and the eddy of general human life. I think that probably for the bombers, religion is the gin, the tonic of all the other motives that have propelled them to doing what they do. But I do think that the religious aspect of it is very significant. And I think that it is expressive of a crisis in Islam that is of very, very profound proportions. And I think that the crisis is bred of an increasing literalism, an increasing look at the fundamental scriptures and tenets of Islam and reducing them to their most sanguinary and literal take. And the crisis for mainstream Islam is that it obliges Muslims who belong to the mainstream to impose a firewall between the beliefs of ISIS and mainstream Islam. And as far as I can tell, that is proving to mainstream Muslims to be a huge challenge. And
do you think that Tariq Ramadan is right when he says the questions are always asked of mainstream Muslims and we don't ask enough of the other questions? You know, Tony Blair's foreign policy and our intervention and how much that plays into it.
Well, actually, I think that we do dwell on that a very great deal, and I think in a way it would be reassuring to think that they are motivated by hostility towards, say, British foreign policy, because if that were the case, then we could actually do something about it. But I don't think they are. I think they have a far more apocalyptic strain to their motivation, and if they were being motivated purely by a desire to respond to Western foreign policy, why, for instance, have they been practicing genocidal policies against the Yazidis? What have the Yazidis ever done to them?
When Western governments are quick to say that extremism is not rooted in religion, which is tolerant...
Well, but why do we assume that religion is tolerant? I mean, this is very much the sort of thought for the day notion, that you have a sort of warm, mushy, essentially Anglican idea that everyone should just get along. But if you look at the history of religion, it has existed to divide as well as to join. It has existed to inspire violence as well as peace.
Tariq Ramadan, very briefly, if you can come back on that.
Yes, I think it's true that religion is an instrument. It could be an instrument for promoting peace, and some are instrumentalizing it. Now we have to come together and to understand quite clearly that from Europe, we are all condemning what is happening, but what we need now is to get it right, not to essentialize religion and saying it's religious. It's also political. It has to do with what we are doing, and also the Muslim majority countries and the governments with despotic regime.
Tariq Ramadan.
Is also that
thank you very much. Sorry, it's just breaking up there at the end. That's all we have time for.